for today we are going to talk about what is the relationship between learning strategies and acquisition. So as we all know, learning strategies are the mental and communicative procedures learners use in order to learn and use the language. Learning styles are the general orientations to the learning processes exhibited by the learners. And for many years now, researchers have been interested in the following questions related to learning styles and strategies. So the researchers have conducted or have made 4 questions regarding on the learning styles and strategies. So the first question will be, what is the relationship between learning strategy preferences and other learner characteristics such as educational level, ethnic background, first language? Second question is, do effective learners share certain strategy preferences? Third is, can strategies be taught? And the fourth is, does strategy training make a difference to second language acquisition? So, before we get the relationship between the learning strategies and the acquisition, let's define first what is learning strategies. So, according to Cohen and Apek in 1980, around 15 years ago, they defined strategy training as a vocabulary acquisition. They found that there are certain techniques such as paired associates technique which did give a successful acquisition or result. And at the same time, Carroll, during 1981, looked at the inductive learning. So within that study, it was found that the ability to study the samples of language and induct the rules of the learning, that particular aspect of language, was an aspect of language aptitude. Also, O'Malley in 1987 studied the effect of different types of strategy training. That includes metacognitive, cognitive, and social affective. And now, we will be looking onto the strategic preferences and the biographical variables. So there's a study by Willing in 1988 wherein he obtained data on the learning preferences of 517 students. Willing was looking for a possible correlation between learning preferences and biographical variables. The principal means of the data collection was a questionnaire, so he used a questionnaire for that activity, and that questionnaires will be used by the learners to be completed in an interview style. Low proficiency learners were interviewed in their first language, so they have, or Willing interviewed the low proficiency learners, or as we could say, those that cannot understand the lesson well using their first language. One of the major aims of the investigation was to explore the possible learning style difference attributable to different learners' biographical variables. And it is widely accepted by the teachers that such things as ethnicity, age, and other factors will have an effect on preferred ways of learning. And then Willing investigated on the following variables. Number 1, the ethnic group. Ethnic group is where the students came from. And then age group. So as we are all familiar about the age group, the younger and the older ones. Level of the previous education. If the learner had a previous education or if the learner has stopped, will it affect their understanding for the lesson? The length of residence in Australia, because this experiment happened in Australia, so most of the questionnaires would be regarding Australia itself, since Willing is looking at the graphical variables. And then the speaking proficiency level. So in Australia, there are different languages like the Aboriginals are using. So he's also trying to check if the interviewees will be using straight English or their native language. But as we have said, he will be interviewing the low proficiency students with their first native or their first language. And last is type of learning program, whether in full-time or part-time course. Because as we all know, not all the students that are in a school are full-time students. There are students who are just doing part-time. And then, the study came up with several surprising findings. In the first place, there were certain learning activities that were almost universally popular. These were activities that did not enjoy similar popularity among teachers, as follow-up investigation of the teachers' preferences by Yunan in 1988. One example is error correction by the teacher was highly valuable by all learners. So, not all the learners has appreciated the corrections that were given by the teacher, but most of them, kasi nga, it was stated here that highly valued by almost all. So, when you say almost all, there are few students that did not appreciate the error correction that was made by the teacher. While students' self-discovery of the error was given a low rating. So, most of the students, they didn't add, how would I say this? Self-discovery. So, they put aside the self-discovery questionnaires. They're much more focused on the error corrections kasi nga, most of them are satisfied with that, while the self-discovery errors was put aside. And the most surprising finding that they had was none of the biographical variables correlated significantly with any of the learning preferences. This finding, which runs counter to the folk wisdom of the classroom and staff room, suggests that personality factors are more significant than preferences. More significant than socio-cultural variables and educational background for learning strategy preferences. So as we all know, the fact that the study was conducted in a second effect on the outcomes, and it would be useful to replicate the study in foreign language context, because the experiment that was made was done in the first language na. So there is a possibility that the test can be translated into a foreign language context. So this one. Just a moment. Ma'am, wait lang. Wala ko yung page. Wait lang. Alam ko, baka wait lang. So now let's talk about the good language learner. In a rather different type of study, Jones and other researchers in 1987 set out to determine whether there were differences between effective and ineffective learners in terms of their awareness of different types of strategy. Because, di ba nga, the first topic that we've talked about is relationship between the learning strategies and acquisition. So they also had a study regarding the good language learners. They found that effective learners are aware of the processes underlying their own learning and seek to use appropriate learning strategies to control their own learning. Again, Noonan in 1991 also found that one of the characteristics of the good language learners was the ability to reflect on and articulate the process underlying their own learning. So, according to this research, most of the learners who are doing self-studying or who's aware of what's happening on their learning is or can be tagged as an effective learning. Those who are those who are reflecting about their learning, they can be tagged as an effective learner. And then, similarity in an overview research into strategy training, O'Malley and Chamot in 1990 found indications that more effective learners differed from less effective ones in their use of strategy. So, the two can be separated, effective and ineffective, with the use of their strategy. So, as we all know, that's very basic na. Those effective students has their own strategy. Why did they become effective? Rather than those ineffective students. Kasi ineffective students sometimes just follow what does the effective students are doing. And then, in their well-known study of the good language learners, Rubin and Thompson in 1983 suggested that good or efficient learners tend to exhibit the data for the study. Tend to exhibit tend to exhibit specific characteristics presented in there's a table that you will see. So a few years ago there was, or the author investigated 44 good language learners. So the author of this book had done an investigation in order to find out whether there are any common patterns in their experience. And the learners had all learned English as a foreign language in a variety of South Asian countries such as Hong Kong, Thailand, Indonesia, the Philippines, Malaysia, and Singapore. They are all good learners in that they had all attained bilingual competence in the language. So they were understanding this. They are already tagged as bilingual because they are already good with their first language. And then they have mastered, as what's said in here, that they, what's that word? They have all attained bilingual competence. So when you say you have attained the bilingual competence, you have been good with the second language, which is English. And then there were two strands to this research. One that looked at the good language learners and the other that explored the effect of teachers' learning strategy preferences on their own teaching style. The author would not be concerned with this second strand in this one. And then there were two reasons for selecting language teachers as research subject. In the first place, by selecting English language teachers, it was easier to locate subjects with high level of proficiency. Secondly, it was felt that because teachers would have the metacognitive and metalinguistic withdrawal to conceptualize their experience, they would be better able to reflect on the articulate their foreign language learning experience. There is a table in the book wherein the things that help the most is separated to the things that help them least. And then strategy training and task performance. In the field of foreign language, Barnett in 1998 investigated the effect of strategy training on the reading of French as a foreign language. This is just an experimental group. However, it outperformed the control group. The difference were not statistically significant. However, this study is a little bit difficult to interpret as the strategies themselves were not made explicit to the students. So this strategies were not given directly to them. And then a recent study of Green and Oxford in 1995 looked at the patterns of variation in strategy used by students at different levels of proficiency. They found that there is a significant relationship between the strategy used and the language they are learning. In particular, they found that active use of the target language with a strong emphasis on practicing naturalistic situations was the most important factor of the development of proficiency in a second language. So it was stated here that if they will be using it naturally, kasi you could know that a speaker is using the language naturally if he is just talking, he is using it in a conversational manner. Not like what, for example, when the Asians, the Koreans, when they went here, they're trying to use the dictionary to translate what they wanted to say. So the study of Green and Oxford stated that if the language is being used normally or on a conversational way, the learning would be much more easier and the output will be a higher proficient learners. In an investigation into the effect of providing opportunities for reflection, self-reporting, and self-monitoring among university students in Hong Kong, Noonan, again in 1997, found that opportunities to reflect on their learning led students to greater sensitivity to learning process over time. Students were also able to make greater connections between their English classes and the content courses conducted in English. Finally, opportunities to keep guided journals helped learners to develop skills for articulating what they wanted to learn and how they wanted to learn it. So, yun nga, there was, if the student is already good with English, or the learner is already good with English, and then this study by Noonan shows that it will be, or the student will be also good to other subjects that are conducted in English. And then Cohen, in 1995 and 1996 in North America, studied the impact of strategy training on a group of 55 foreign language students in University of Minnesota. And then the researchers sought to identify the effect of explicit instruction strategies for speaking proficiency and the relationship between recorded frequency of these strategies and rating of class performance. They were also interested in how students characterize their rationale for strategy use while performing speaking tasks. And in this study, 3 experimental groups received the same instruction as 3 comparison groups over a 10-week period. In addition, the experimental groups were given explicit instruction in the application of the speaking strategy to skill of speaking. On the questions of whether strategy training made a difference in class performance, the researchers have found out that experimental group outperformed the comparison group on 2 of the 3 post-tests, while the researchers argue the beneficial effect of strategy training. They point out that the results were complex and in some cases not easy to interpret. And again, the author of this book had her own investigation that affected strategy training on a group of undergraduate students at the University of Hong Kong. This study was motivated by 2 factors. The first of this was the fact that even though they paid lip service to the importance of English for their future careers, many students come into English courses at the University of Hong Kong with no motivation to learn English. So in this study by the author, the students who are going to the English class most of them are not willing to learn English. Maybe it's because of their job, or maybe they are just being pushed. So, just to continue that, most of them have learned English throughout their secondary schooling and are demotivated by their perceptions of lack of progress, by what many report as poor instructional methods and by an increasing pressure with the change of sovereignty from Britain to China to devote their language learning efforts to Autumn 1. The second factor has to do with the limited amount of the time that students are given to develop skills in academic English. So as we all know, English cannot be learned in just a snap of a finger or a blink of an eye. So this research also shows that 48 hours with an additional 12 hours of self-directed learning in the form of contract. It was felt that the incorporation of learning strategy dimension to the curriculum would help to maintain or enhance motivation and might also lead to greater appreciation on the part of the learners of the processes underlying their own learning. And then lastly, this study provides evidences that the strategy training does make a difference in several key areas. The first one, it had a significant effect on the student motivation. This result is consistent with and confirms other recent research into strategy training on motivation. It also had significant effect on students' knowledge of strategies and their appreciation of the use of strategies in their language learning. The result of strategy training on use of the strategies is less clear. This may reflect that the fact that students had relatively few opportunities to take control of their learning in the context in which the study took place. And it's also clear from the analysis of the individual strategies presented in the preceding section that the effect of the strategy training is not uniform across all strategies. So as we all know, even though the strategy is good, it wouldn't always give a good result because it will always depend on the learners itself. And then continuing. In other cases, the effects were less apparent. Individual analysis as well as an interpretive analysis of the qualitative interview data showed that prior knowledge and the subject's evaluation of the utility of particular strategies for university-level studies had an important effect on their reaction to and willingness to employ particular strategies. Analysis of the classroom observation data and lesson notes and materials also revealed that the fact that not all strategies receive equal amounts of attention in the classroom and that this differential attention had an effect on students' response. In short, the greater the attention, the greater the effect. So if the students were giving focus onto that specific strategy, it will give a good result. But if the students doesn't, participate, doesn't cooperate on the teacher executing that strategy, it will be useless. However, as amount of focus on individual strategies was not the one of the variables focused on in the study, it's not possible to comment on it in greater detail. On the other hand, it's important to know the value of collecting qualitative data. So, since we are researching, we are familiar with the qualitative data in the form of students' interviews, as well as the classroom observation data in studies of this kind. Without such data, some of the quantitative results would have been interpretable. In fact, some would simply not have made sense. So, that would be it, ma'am. That's my report. Thank you.
You go na.